I'm really glad you brought up Adrienne. So I wanted to explain a deeper level that you went conceptually here that is very fun, in that all of the final girls in your novel have, they've, as I mentioned before, their mass murders are based on these horror films, these classic slasher horror films. But then their names are taken from the actors who played those final girls in those films,
Right.
which is a really fun little Easter egg for horror fans. And Adrienne King plays the final girl in Friday the 13th, which you mentioned earlier.
Adrienne's an interesting story because Adrienne, when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies. And so I would read about them and pretend I'd seen them so that my friends didn't think I was a loser. And I managed to convince my scoutmaster that when we went for snacks at the gas station, I could use my snack money to buy magazines because like reading is good. And so I bought I think it was issue 12 of Fangoria, April of 81. And it had Friday 13th Part 2 on the cover and a big feature on the opening of the movie. So I could talk with real confidence in carpool about the opening of Friday 13th Part 2. I couldn't do the rest of the movie. But at the beginning of the movie, Adrienne King, the final girl from Part 1, she's like hanging around her house. It's kind of a crummy apartment and talking to her mom on the phone, wearing these weird plaid overalls. And like all of a sudden, Jason just like appears and ice picks her in the head. And I was like, as a kid, I think I was 8 when I saw that. I was like, what? Like a character from a movie who's gone through all this horrible stuff just gets knocked off at the beginning of the next one. Like it was so casually cruel that it really just stuck with me. And it's the first time I started thinking about movie characters outside the movies, like what else they're doing, like they have lives and they're people. And it's interesting. So when I came out with Final Girls and had the early editions, I sent one to Adrienne King. A friend of mine had her address and she really loved it. And so we talked on the phone and it was a really interesting conversation. She was a big fan. She loved the book a lot. And she told me that when she made Friday the 13th Part 2, she thought she was the star. They didn't tell her any different. And she had told them that she had some personal difficulties going on, but that she wanted to do the movie. And she didn't hear from a little while, and they heard. And she showed up thinking it was her first day on set and the first day of the shoot. And it was really the last day of production. And they didn't show her the script. They asked her to improvise a phone call with her mom and do a few reaction shots. And then she didn't know what was happening until a stuntman, in Jason's costume, stabbed her with this prop, ice pick. And that was it. And she suddenly realized what had happened. And they just packed her up into the car, sent her back to her motel, and just dropped her and didn't pay her on top of that. But it was one day of work. And so they just ditched her. And it turns out that the personal difficulty she was having in her life, she thinks they probably assumed she was pregnant. The personal difficulty was she had a stalker. And it was someone who was taking pictures of her in public where she didn't see them and then leaving them on her doorstep. They really wrecked her life. And it got to the point where she had to install a lock on the inside of her bathroom door in order to feel safe enough to take a shower. And so it was really weird to me that there was that I don't know, that I had sort of wanted to rewrite a happier ending for this final girl played by this actress I'd never met, who was like 21 when she did that movie. And that was her relationship to this movie. And, she went on to she's had a long career as a voiceover artist and doing additional dialogue recording and everything. And she actually wound up, she really wanted to do it. And so we sort of made it happen. And she's the narrator for the audiobook, Final Girl Support Group. But it was this weird closing of the circle for both of us that was kind of very random and strange and really nice. It's kind of like this really gratifying moment that I got to connect with this person who sort of in a weird abstract way inspired this book and, really hear about what was going on. To me, it was just a story in a magazine and a character in a movie. And to her, it was her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk about having a final girl take ownership of the slasher story, having Adrienne King read the audiobook. Is that like, what came first? Like, did you dream about a final girl being able to, like one of the actors from those movies being able to voice your audiobook, or did that just come out of that conversation with Adrienne?
I had thought about it, but I really hadn't, it really hadn't occurred to me. You know what I mean? It was like, that would be really cool. But, and then when I talked to Adrienne and she was talking about how much she loved it, I was like, oh my God, this makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like absolute sense.